Hello everyone, I'm Isabel Chilman, Retail Week's Relationships Director, and for our first fireside chat of today, I'm joined by Pippa Wick's Executive Director, John Lewis, about the people and advice that have shaped her as a leader. Pippa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Isabel. Lovely to meet you and virtually to be with everybody today. It's really exciting.
So to kick off with, you joined John Lewis at a really difficult time for the entire retail sector. How has this past year been for you?
Well, it's always interesting and challenging to join new organisations and get up to speed quickly, and clearly all the more so when you can't be physically together on a continuous basis. So we've all had to be very adaptive, and I know everybody in the room and on the screens will be feeling that. So that's a very common thing. So I think one of the things has been to take a little bit more time to introduce oneself to people and to understand how long people have been with the partnership, previous roles they might have had, what they're passionate about. You know, a partnership is a very different kind of organisation, so why they joined and why they feel strongly about that. So it's creating a bit more space, really. So those introductory conversations tending to have a bit more space and time around them. I think that's really been very helpful. When we have been able to be out of lockdown and out and about in a safe way, just grabbing every minute of those moments to be out there meeting, in our case, partners, but also customers of the business as well. And so I'm very passionate about really understanding who the customer is and what they want. And we started a programme of customer closeness in September when things began to open up, and we really doubled down on that because we weren't quite sure how much time we'd have to really get under the skin of our customers. But we did shop with them. We were in their homes, obviously safely, looking at how they lived and so on. And so just grabbing every moment of being able to be out in stores or with customers and really getting that input. And then obviously with the teams, doing deep dives as fast as we can when we're in the ability to kind of meet face to face. Once you've actually met some people face to face, then the next conversations are easier, obviously. So I think that's been really important. I think the other thing is to, we always do a check-in. So we meet as an executive for John Lewis brand every week, and we always do a check-in. How are people feeling? And what's on their minds, what's big? And it's a mixture of the work stuff, but it's also the home stuff too, and being really open to those extra challenges people have got, because we've been through a lot of homeschooling and a lot of our partners do have kids, you know, and we've just got to appreciate that makes the day very tricky. So we've tried to encourage people to work flexibly around what suits them and their family. We've tried to be really understanding about that. And we've also just acknowledged that people can't always be everywhere at all time because of all these things that they're balancing, and just being human about that. And so that's made a massive difference. And I think, you know, if you say, what will you take from the pandemic time into future life? I think just taking a bit more time for checking in with people right at the beginning of conversations to see where they're coming from will make a big difference for all of us.
Now, my next question was going to be, what do you think the pandemic has taught you about being a leader? And you've just touched on something there. Are there any other learnings that you've taken from the past year?
So some of them, I guess, have been even more relevant in the past year. But because I specialise in transformations and turnarounds, that's kind of what I do. And I've been doing that for about 30 plus years now. I do have some ways of working that I have to deploy for myself in order to be able to do the kind of work at the pace that we have to do it, and still to be doing it after 35 years, if I could put it like that. And actually what we've done is to try to deploy those through the pandemic, because they are about work-life balance. And for many people, the work and life home balance has all got messed up. And so we found actually some of the things that I've used to stay sane over the years have been really helpful on a wider basis. So let me give you some examples of that. We try to use the schedule send button so that we're not deluging people with emails outside of a normal working day, which for sort of head officey people we just describe as before 7:30 in the morning and after 7 at night. We also do that at the weekend. Now, that sounds trivial, but as leaders, we create big shadows. And if I'm sending emails to people, even if it's said on the bottom, you don't have to respond to this, they would be feeling that they probably did. And the minimum would be they'll be thinking about it while they're having dinner with the family, or, you know, supposed to be taking some recuperation time. So we've now got amazing technology, which means we can work when we like, but be really thoughtful about when people are receiving stuff. So that's an example. We're looking at having Zoom-free Fridays, so you can meet people in person, talk on the phone, just do your thinking, times like that. We're also looking at, you know, when do you start the working day from a Zoom point of view, and when do you finish it, because we need time to think, we need time to follow up on actions. And the temptation of the new technology is you can be on a Zoom from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. And you know that isn't a healthy way to be. 45-minute meetings, so you can get up, walk about 15 minutes, have a cup of tea. If you're having all-day meetings, really schedule in breaks every hour and be religious about them. We did find that some partners were wanting to carry on working through the breaks, but then they were exhausted at the end of the day. So, you know, we said, come on, the breaks are for a break. And it's just sort of a whole list of small things they seem, but they all add up to something that's quite big. Making sure people take their holiday and that it's not interrupted by continuous email, even if their holiday means they've gone on holiday in their sitting room rather than in their study. You know, just being thoughtful in that kind of way, I think has made a huge difference. I mean, you can't do turnarounds and transformations on black coffee. And if I worked 7 days a week, you know, I wouldn't be effective. So it's all about being effective and having enough energy for the difficult tasks in hand. And I think actually in a pandemic, these things are really helpful too.
Looking back on your career, what have been some of the standout highs for you?
Standout highs. So a couple really. I remember I was in my early 20s, actually then working for a management consulting firm, and the partner there called me into his office and he said, I'd like you to lead on this particular project. It was a stock reduction project. The client is X. You've got 6 weeks to do the work. Off you go. And I can remember thinking, oh my heavens, I've never done a stock reduction project before, and this is quite interesting. Anyway, because of the support, the belief that he had that I could do this, and the support from the organisation and from him to structure the work and think it through and sort of manage the client and so on, it turned out to be really both informational and learning for me, massive learning, but also a really successful project. But it was almost a bit like the equivalent of, you know, when a baby's to first start walking, it was a sort of big solo, go do this, but I'm right behind you. And so that was Standout, the way that we can give people big opportunities, ask them to step up, be there gently supporting, but also giving them the independence that, you know, they need. That would be one example. Another example was when I was given an opportunity to step in to become CFO of a public limited company when I was 29. I don't have an accounting background. When I was asked if I would consider this, I was actually eating a cherry tomato at the time, which I swallowed whole because I was so surprised at being asked. And if you'd said to me, you know, think about all the functions in an organisation, rank the most likely that you'll do to the least likely, you know, being finance director would have been right down the bottom because I didn't have an accounting background. Anyway, so considered that opportunity over the next few hours, realised it could be transformational and really helpful. But again, the same thing happened. The support network around was really good. The competency of people in my team was good. It taught me skills about delegation, about learning to use experts, even though I wasn't the expert, to help us as a team get an answer. So it was the most fabulous learning. And because there was just so much to absorb, if you hadn't learned to delegate well, then you would have just collapsed in a heap. So these two early things, I mean, both of those situations were, you know, before I was 30, early opportunities like that with the right support around, I think can be really transformational for all the people we work with.
And what about a time in your career where you have been challenged? Can you talk us through that and how you came out of that?
So later on in my career, running some businesses, inheriting a management team and a leader for one of these businesses, obviously don't want to be specific for various reasons, you can imagine, realising that we hadn't got quite the right leader, and we were moving at a pace that wasn't fast enough. The CEO of the company for whom I worked had put this person into that role. So actually putting together the case that said, actually, we ought to move this person somewhere else where the opportunity fits that person's skill set and bring in somebody new, sort of managing through that, keeping everybody intact, really. I mean, when you're moving people from one role to another because perhaps it's not suitable for them, how do you maintain everyone's dignity in this process? Which is really important. Keeping people whole is really important, and that was quite challenging. And at the time, I had just started working with a coach, which I still work with now and find incredibly helpful. And that person helped me map out the conversations and the timing, so that nobody felt rushed. Everybody kind of came along at the same moment, had the difficult conversations in the right kind of way, and with dignity, and everybody being intact, we were able to make the right moves and bring somebody in to run that business whilst also giving the original person a different kind of role that was more suited. So that was probably one of the most challenging situations, again, quite early on in my career. But management is everything. If you've got the right team and the right leaders, you can do anything. If you haven't, it's a real problem. And so getting the people right is so fundamental.
Who would you say are the people that have shaped you as a leader over the years?
So my parents, to start with, I have a brother, and they always treated us as if we were totally equal. And, I did the same things as my brother, he did the same things as me. And there was no kind of difference there. And I think that set me up really well for being in an environment where we can all be the same as everybody else and have the same opportunities. I had a client when I was a consultant very early on, my first client, who I'm still very friendly with and close to. And again, him just believing in me and then just staying in touch and supporting me through my career. I'm very grateful. I feel like that person, he's got my back, and he cares about, the moves I make, great advice. So just one or two people really on the journey who, some of them later in life in the last few years, who I feel are watching out, and, making suggestions that are so constructive and so helpful. It's not hundreds of people, it's a handful of people, but it did include my parents.
I love that answer. And to end, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Actually, I don't necessarily always live this out, but I try to keep 40% of your diary unscheduled, so that you can do the drop-in coffees, pop into, in my case, the store, be with customers, do the thinking. So this whole sort of back-to-back meetings, I mean, when I start doing a particular transformation turnaround, you sort of have to do that for a while. But there comes a point when you need to create the space to step back, and then it gives a space to the others. So I'm not at the 40% at the moment, but I want to move towards that. And it was really lovely advice very, very early on in my career. Again, when I became an executive, actually, first of all, keep 40% for you to be able to think strategically.
I think that's fantastic advice. Not a piece of advice I've ever heard given before as well. So a really, really expert. Thank you. Well, actually, thank you for joining us today, Pippa. I'm afraid we're at the end of our time, but thank you so much for sharing your career story and your advice for everyone.
Pleasure. Lovely to see you. Have a good rest of the day.
And now back to Ria.